Hello, friends. It has been, again, a while since I've been able to return to these commentaries on Letters on Occult Meditation. We are now on page 270, and we're dealing with a very important subject, um, accepted discipleship. Now, let me just make sure that I've done this correctly. Now, for a more detailed and even more informative understanding, we can go, and I think will go, to the last part of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, where we have the 6 stages of discipleship, of which accepted discipleship is the 4th. Little Chelaship comes first, then Chela in the light, then Chela on the thread, and then accepted discipleship. Master DK does not get into that much detail in one of these first books, but of course, what he has to say, since he doesn't really repeat himself, will be important for us to know. And of course, not all of us have read all of the books or all of the sections of all of the books. I think I must be one of them because every once in a while I come upon something completely new to me, which advises me that I have not necessarily read that section. When I was working on the externalization of the hierarchy, I found quite a number of those pages and have since made amends for my incomplete approach earlier. And I still have some work to do, I think, in telepathy and the etheric vehicle, which I hope to offer as one of these commentary books. So here we are with accepted discipleship, and the date is not the 8th, it's rather the 18th. So 10 days have passed when I wish that every day would be a day in which I could work in this way. And as much as I would like to, our um, program of meetings and broadcasts and so forth uh, seems to make that less likely. I'll see what I can do about it because I'm eager, I'm anxious for you to have another look at these important texts. Okay, well, accepted discipleship, this is our subject for the moment. And let's just see here what the last one was. If I can find it. Okay, so a probationer's 3 objects, that is discussing probationary discipleship, and we went over that quite thoroughly, I think. And then from the stage of probation, while there are some intervening stages that DK mentions elsewhere, it seems that the probationary disciple turns into the true disciple, who is, after all, finally the accepted disciple. Yeah. So the second period, wherein man is an accepted disciple, is perhaps one of the most difficult. in the man's whole period of lives. Well, that's being brought home to me in a refreshing way, or a way at least that refreshes my mind on the subject. And maybe it comes as a surprise to you also. But let's see what DK has to say about it. Why is it one of the most difficult? Well, he says, it is made so in several ways. He is definitely a part of the Master's group and is within the consciousness of the Master at all times, being kept within his aura. Now that is an important statement. So we can understand the considerable responsibilities that go along with accepted discipleship, if in being so we are within the Master's consciousness at all times. Obviously, we want to be, however little our effect may be, a useful presence rather than any kind of disruptive presence. This involves, the Tibetan says, the steady holding of a high vibration. I would have you ponder on what the effect of this would be. Think of it in your life. If we could hold this high vibration. To hold this vibration is at all times a difficult thing to do. It frequently involves an intensification of all that subsists. I mean, it exists, but in a more subterranean way within the man's nature, and may lead, especially at first, to curious demonstration. Well, a battle would be on, would it not, if one is dealing with subsistence of certain factors that don't belong in the aura of the Master, or i.e. within the ashram. So one will have something of a contest here, and maybe some of us have experienced that attempt to hold the high and yet have the lower factors intrude. Yet, if ever a man is to be able to hold the forces, the force, that is the result of the application of the rod of initiation, he has to demonstrate his ability to do so at an earlier stage. And, if I can just get this to move, be able to hold himself stably and move steadily forward when subjected to the intensification of vibration that comes from a master. So remember, a point of tension is focused, immovable will, and a point of tension must be held under these circumstances to prove oneself capable of receiving initiation, remembering at the same time that the initiate is initiate before he is initiated. He has demonstrated the ability to reach that level and to a certain extent hold that level before he is initiated. And one of the things accomplished in the actual ceremony is the stabilization of the ability to hold. So the stabilization of an ability to hold a high vibration is confirmed during the ceremony of initiation. And yet we have to prove, interestingly, that we can do at least some of that on our own. And this faces many temptations and sudden reactions coming from that which subsists within us during every day. There's always going to be that which attempts or which is capable of dragging the vibration down to a lower level. So that when we realize how responsible we are to maintain the higher vibration, maybe we'll do a better job of it. Requirement after requirement, don't you agree? And so this path of real discipleship, real accepted discipleship is not easy. Of the aspirant, vacillation is expected. And which one of us cannot say, or, well, which one of us can say that we do not vacillate? It would be rare to find such a person at our stage of development, but increasingly the non-vacillating position, non-oscillating position can be established. So such an individual here, he has to discipline himself so that nothing can enter into his consciousness that could in any way harm the group to which he belongs, or to be antagonistic to the master's vibration. Again, what a responsibility when, in a way, choosing our reactions to circumstances which might normally be one type of reaction, and yet is not allowed, given our responsibility to the larger group. If I might so express it, he says, so as to give you some conception of my meaning, when he first forms part of the group enclosed in the master's aura, he is kept by occult means that of which we are not certain. He is kept on the periphery of that aura until he has learned to throw off automatically and to reject immediately every thought and desire unworthy of the self, the soul, and thus harmful to the group. Until he has learned to do this, he cannot advance into a closer relationship, but must remain where he can be, it's almost amusing to read it, automatically shut off. Those who have drawn closer to the ashram maybe have that experience of at times being shut off because they realize that what they have been thinking, what they have been doing is not appropriate for the work of the ashram, for the welfare of the ashram, for the non-disturbance of the master. So, Saturn, responsibility at every turn. Now let's see further. But gradually he purifies himself still more. Gradually he develops group consciousness and thinks, which tells us that even some we might consider rather unworthy are allowed in to at least begin their association, their affiliation with the master's group. He purifies himself still more. Gradually, he develops group consciousness and thinks in group terms of service. Gradually, his aura takes on more and more coloring, the coloring of his master's aura, till he blends and has earned the right to be gathered closer to his master's heart, which is, I think, in the discipleship books, considered to be the sixth stage of discipleship. Now, you know what? I think I've made a mistake earlier. Shayla on the thread, I think, is following accepted discipleship. So accepted discipleship is the third phase. Then Shayla within the aura, and then Shayla within the master's heart. I won't go back to try to correct that and just assume that you've listened for another 10 minutes or so and have caught what I've said here. Okay. So let's just take a look here at Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1. And I'm going to, there's quite a few references to accepted discipleship. And let's see, I know you're not looking at this with me right now. Maybe I can find it, the list, you know. And here, yeah, here it is. This is the stage of accepted discipleship, and I'll just show it to you. This is it. Little Chelaship, Chela in the light, and accepted discipleship, and then the Chela on the thread. Yes, okay. And then Chela within the aura, and Chela within the master's heart. Okay. Now going back to where we were. So let's get the sequence down carefully, as much for my sake as yours. Little Chelaship first. Whoop. Let's see if I can get this correct. Yeah. And I wonder, there goes. Little Chelaship. Chela, this is strange that I have to use that bracket. Chela in the light, accepted. Discipleship. And Chela on the thread. And then Chela within the master's aura, and Chela in the heart of the master. And then finally, although he doesn't really discuss it, the blending of the lights. All right, that should at least keep me clear and keep you clear too. So that's interesting that his aura takes on more the coloring of his master's aura. In Master DK's case, well, certainly indigo would be prominent, till he blends. The blending power. Sometimes we're told about the blending power even of the third logos. Interestingly, he has earned the right to be gathered closer, having still to pass through Chela on the thread and Chela within the master's aura, to that stage which we call Chela within the master's heart. Later, I will explain the technical meaning of this phrase when dealing with the work of the master with the pupil. And this is, where does that come? In Dhyana 1. Suffice it to say that as the term of accepted disciple progresses, and it varies in different cases, how long one is an accepted disciple. There were some who DK was addressing who had been accepted disciples for 5 lives, and some who were new to being accepted in that way. That the term of accepted disciple, as that term progresses, and it varies, the disciple advances ever closer to the heart of the group and finds his own place and functional activity in that body corporate. So, how many of us can say that we have found our place within the group ashram, and we know what it is. Well, maybe we're learning to do that. And also then that would follow the place of the groups, group or groups with which we may be affiliated. What is the place of such a group? If it relates to the ashram, what is its role within the ashram? Okay, that is the secret. The finding of one's place, not so much one's place upon the ladder of evolution, for that is approximately known, but in service. This is of more importance than is realized, for it covers the period which at the end will definitely demonstrate what path a man will follow after the fifth initiation. So that's interesting, a precursor of the choice of cosmic path upon the way of higher evolution will be indicated by the finding of one's place earlier on, one's place of service earlier on and lower down, symbolically, upon the ladder of evolution. Finding one's place in service so that the fit is really there and you know it. It is congenial. It is according to your capabilities, according to what you can give and give most successfully. So that is to be remembered by us. It covers the period which at the end will definitely demonstrate which path the man will follow after the fifth initiation on the way of higher evolution. So question yourself. Do we have a sense of what that place really is? And where our best service within our group or groups can be offered. Well, we will go on because this has been actually just a short section. We will go on to sonship to the master, and in the list of the stages of discipleship in Dina 1, sonship is not mentioned, but here it is, and maybe we can equate what that sonship is in relation to the other stages which are definitely and particularly given. So starting on page 271, we now come to the time when the disciple moves on to that much coveted position of a son of the master. He is then a part consciously and at all times of the master's consciousness. Now, it seemed to say even earlier that he was within the master's consciousness at all times, but this seems to be a more intense and constant type of awareness. The interplay between the master and the disciple is being rapidly perfected, and the disciple can now consciously and at will link up with the master and ascertain his thoughts. Now, I think this may be more than Chela on the thread. He can enter into the master's plans, desires, and will. And this he has won by the right of similarity of vibration, and because the shutting off process necessitated earlier by discordant vibration is practically superseded. The disciple has so purified himself. Notice that purification is something going on in addition, beyond the first degree. Sometimes we say, well, I took care of purification at the first degree. No, it's an ongoing issue. Out of Shambhala comes purification, destruction, and organization. And that's a rather high source from which purification can emanate. So that shutting off process, the need for it is superseded practically. The disciple has so purified himself that his thoughts and desires cause no disquietude to the master and no contrary vibration to the group. He has been tried and not been found wanting, and his life service in the world is more concentrated and perfected, and he is daily developing his power to give and increasingly his equipment. All this concerns his relationship to some master and to some one group soul. Of course, a higher group soul in a higher sense, and not in the unconscious sense in which group soul applies to the animal kingdom. So this is a new stage. And I'll just indicate it as being very important. This is a stage in which one sees the specific plans of the master, the specific purpose and causes. Notice the word disquietude. Disquietude, disrupting perhaps the silence of the ashram, as contrary vibration may well do. So as I say, this category seems to include maybe a couple of other categories in the more detailed list from Dinah, but let's see which it might include. It is certainly, I would say, beyond Shela on the thread, which is a immediate and spontaneous invocation of the master's energy, causing him no undue loss of energy and no particular need to pay great attention to the invoking disciple. Okay. So this stage, sonship to the master, is not dependent upon his taking initiation. Initiation is a technical matter and can be expressed in terms of esoteric science. A man can take initiation and yet not be a son of the master. Now, this is an important issue. It's the whole idea that, there are many who have not passed the second degree, and yet they are accepted disciples. There are those who have passed the second degree, and they are not yet accepted disciples. So a man can take initiation and yet not be a son of the master. Discipleship is a personal relationship governed by terms of karma and affiliation, and is not dependent upon a man's status in the lodge, though I will say that there will be certain low levels of discipleship which probably will not allow an individual into the higher, low levels of initiation, I mean, which will not allow the individual into high stages of discipleship. So keep this clear in your mind, he says. Cases have been known when a man has acquired through diligence the technical requisites for initiation before becoming affiliated with any particular master. So this is one of those exceptions and something we have to bear in mind. Our karmic affiliation with certain masters, or maybe a particular master, will make our acceptance in that sense more likely than even one who does not have that affiliation and has earned an equal place. Of course, at a certain time, I suspect that affiliation will be offered. So these are some of the intricacies of the relationship between a master and his chela, or maybe a non-relationship. Sonship to the master, that's the section we're in. This later relationship of son to some master has a peculiar sweetness all its own and carries with it certain privileges. So he's helping us distinguish now between sonship and initiatory level per se. Though, as I said, it's probable that the individual has attained a certain degree of initiation before sonship becomes possible. The lower degrees of probationary disciple probably would not be adequate to admit an individual into sonship with, in relation to a particular master. But okay, a certain sweetness is carried with it and certain privileges. The disciple can then lift some of the burden off his master's shoulders and relieve him of some of his responsibilities, thereby setting him free for more extended work. It's so interesting how the greater, in this case, depends upon the lesser, if there is to be an expansion of the work. And the master is not free to pass on to greater service until some of the service for which he was responsible can be taken up by some up-and-coming disciples who are in close relationship to him. These are things to remember and invoke in us, and hopefully evoke, an increased sense of responsibility. I'm thinking about all those letters written by the secretaries of the Arcane School and the mentors of other esoteric schools, and how they really do help, I think, the master with some students who are starting out. And could the master possibly deal with all of them himself? It was quite a burden, even to deal with letters to the 50-some students who were gathered into the Tibetan groups. So when relief comes, release comes. Relief and release. So hence, says the Tibetan, the emphasis laid on service, for it is only as a man serves that he advances. Well, we practice, we learn how to serve better and better and how to take over more responsibility from those who had been holding it before. This operates not just with the master, but with those of us who are disciples and may have gathered around us certain groups and find it's a big responsibility to meet the needs of those groups and therefore welcome, when it happens, the appearance of capable up-and-coming disciples who can assist us in the management of the groups gathered. So this service, it is the keynote of the vibration of the second abstract level, the second level of higher mind, where we usually find what is called response to group vibration. It is the keynote of that plane on which the causal bodies of those who are moving through the initiatory process, and maybe right before, that plane on which those causal bodies can be found. And as far as I understand at present, even the main part of the causal body, or the greater proportion of its vibrations, remain on that second abstract subplane until the point of destruction, until the fourth initiation is achieved. So it is the keynote of the vibration of the second plane, second abstract level. Which is a very affiliative group group conscious level. The point of tension held there on the second abstract subplane brings about the sense of group affiliation, and one's identity becomes that of the group and not just the individual. The master at this period will confer with his, quote, son, and plan the work to be done upon their united point of view. It's like the son is trusted to offer a truthful and useful assessment to the master, so the master can determine the kind of work to be done. In this way, the master, he will develop his pupil's discrimination and judgment and lighten his own load along certain lines, thus setting himself free for other important work. So our assumption of increasingly burdensome responsibility lightens the load of our superior. And that is a thing which all disciples yearn to do, to help the one who is the superior. Let's see if I can get that correct. I think I'm going to have to. Okay. Oh, let's see if I can do that. And hopefully you've been, yeah, you have been watching the right program here. All right. And just take a moment. Well, I'm not sure why that isn't working, but I think I'll just let that go for the moment. But anyway, the idea is there is conferring done, and the work of the disciple is considered of value, and his perspective of value. Now, the final period of those under discussion can have but little submitted about it. It covers the period when a man is mastering the final stages of the path and is entering into closer and closer touch with his group and with the hierarchy. He is not only vibrating in tune with his group and with his master, but is beginning now to gather out his own people and form a group himself. All right. So that is in the later days. Of course, there are many groups today, but we're talking about that level of group leadership, which is somewhat equivalent to what the master can provide to his ashram. And we're getting practice at that by working with the groups on a lower level that we do manage to call together or to sound a note which calls them together. This group will be at first only on emotional and physical levels and on the lower mental. Okay, so it can begin rather early, this practice at forming groups. After the fifth initiation, he will enclose within his aura these groups and those on egoic levels who are his own. You know, in a way, he is a master. And therefore, his inclusiveness is much greater, and the caliber of the groups which he encloses within his consciousness and within his energy aura, the caliber is much higher, but at the same time, there will be a whole hierarchy of possible enclosures. This in no way prevents his being one with his master and group. So maybe Master DK is speaking of himself. In relation to the larger ashram of Master KH, whom he considers his master. Of course, he also, in a higher sense, considers the Christ as his master. But the method of interblending, I can imagine it would be, is considered one of the secrets of initiation. So how can he work with his own gathered individuals, his own gathered groups, and still remain part of the ashram of a superior master, as Master DK is in relation to the greater ashram, Ray ashram of Master KH. And there have been several references where DK talks about considering the Christ as his master. Okay. Many are the technicalities. What he refers to here is the secret of interblending, how apparently different group units are blended together, how they come under a master's supervision, and yet how he remains under the supervision of his superior. It's all part of the hierarchical life. Now, all this, says the Tibetan, coupled with what has been earlier imparted, will give you some idea of the rights and powers acquired at first on the probationary path and later on the path of initiation. The means of development are ever the same, and he comes home punctuating that point which he seeks to emphasize. The means of development are ever the same: occult meditation and service. The inner life of concentration and the outer life of practice, the inner ability to contact the higher, and the outer ability to express that faculty in terms of holy living, the inner irradiation from the spirit, and the outer shining before men. So he certainly makes his point that as much as we may have the inner life of spirituality, we are bound by duty to express it outwardly. So these are the privileges, and this is the power, kind of an analysis of the powers gained earlier on the path of probation and later on the path of initiation. Of course, he leaves out many things, many stages, but it's not necessary to repeat them at all times. It would be burdensome to do so. You know, and of course, there is a path of probationary initiation, which overlaps with stages on the path of discipleship. But if we're aware of them, that may be sufficient. And always the power grows, and power grows with willingness to serve and the enhanced ability to serve due to practice serving, but also due to deepening occult contact with the inner aspects of one's nature. We have just a little bit to go. And we will continue with this little bit and then maybe start a new program when I can on the relationship of master and pupil, chela, disciple. And that seems to be a relatively longer section. Yeah. So that takes us to page 282. The next time when we start at page 274. So it's 8 pages. It's a long section. But let's look at this last paragraph. The subject that we have for the past few days been studying, though not so technical as some of the earlier imparted data, yet carries with it a vibration which will make this 8th letter one of those with the most potent appeal in the series. I think DK understands what will appeal to the modern student just the way in studying cosmic fire in depth, we realize that the beginning of the book has perhaps the least appeal when compared with the what we usually consider the more interesting data regarding the soul functioning. The students of the Tibetan books are not yet, by and large, members of the scientific community, though here and there they can be found. And once they begin to study what he offers, and especially, I suppose, and additionally, what he will offer during the third installment of his work, they will find a gold mine of indications which will advance their science. It's so difficult to get the rays, those on the various rays, to understand each other at first and to recognize certain kinds of terminology which can be acceptable in their own field. I think the Tibetan writes in such a way that while it's not always rigorous fifth-rate terminology, it can have an appeal to the more open-minded of the fifth-rate types who are, as the Tibetan says, the true occultists. DK says we have dealt with the facts as to the masters and who they are and their place in the scheme of things, and we have touched briefly upon what access to a master entails from the standpoint of a pupil. So, you know, a good teacher is always telling you what they're going to tell you, then telling you, and then telling you what they told you. We have seen that access is a gradual process and carries a man from an occasional outer contact with a master and his group, such as, I suppose, DK's group members, students that he was teaching, some 50 of them over the course of the periods from 1931 to even up to 49, really. A gradual process from an occasional contact with a master and his group to a position of the closest intimacy and to an attitude that places the pupil within the aura, Chela within the aura, and close to the heart of his teacher. So patience is required in this, and no presumption will take the place of the true experience. It will only mislead others. And then today we will consider for a while what this gradual changing of position has entailed on the part of some master and what it has necessitated on his side. You know, the analogy probably holds good. The different planets move likewise and draw ever closer to the aura of the solar logos and to that position that we've been calling the heart of the solar, heart of the master. The, the planetary logos within the solar logos's heart, we might say. So I think this will have to do for our program of today. Sometimes I like to go on for hours, but not so possible right now. And this takes us right to here. So 270 to 274. And now we'll move this down. And it was the end of program 55. I always like that number because the alpha numerology spells out Sanat. And today is the 18th of December. And we won from 270 to 274. And next time, maybe even today, maybe, we'll begin at 274. Program 56. But I'll put down that we don't know when we begin, because that's probably true. How much study can we really give to this great outpouring by the Tibetan on behalf of the hierarchy as a whole and on behalf of the second ray ashram? These are very strenuous, busy, fraught, tumultuous times through which we are living. And as we might expect, with the eruption of Pluto from the lower depths as a signal that the Christ and his hierarchy are approaching, much that it is not pleasant to look at, to deal with, comes into our eyes, comes before our eyes. But I emphasize that if we are to be worthy of the outpouring which is coming and which will complete the series of bridging treatises by means of which the Tibetan hopes to approach the knowledge to be gained in the New Age, and hopes to indicate how life can and should proceed in the New Age. If we are to be worthy of that third installment, we have to take maximum advantage of what has already been given. And we well know that even the secret doctrine, which has been with us for, well, 130, 35 years, something like that, that even the secret doctrine is not sufficiently appreciated by a sufficient number of people to help change prevailing thought forms in the way that it otherwise could. So just imagine adding to that the Alice Bailey books produced over a 30-year period, how, if taken seriously and read with understanding by those who are at that point where some bridging is possible, how that could affect the public consciousness and bring more people from a state of dogmatism, adhering as they do to long inculcated but basically childish notions, how the assimilation of the Bailey books could help them bridge towards a greater sense of reality. And then subjective reality would mean something the way it did or used to mean to so many in the East and to those custodians of the wisdom who have protected the teaching over the many years, despite some really forceful incursions against the preservation of that teaching, such as happened, let's say, around 1950 with the invasion of Tibet by China. So we have to keep this teaching alive, and it has to live within the psyche, within the consciousness of many more people, and within many consciousnesses. There is that possibility. Some, admittedly, are just not ready yet. And that's what DK said. He said, well, it'll be a long time before the average individual, maybe we would say the average non-aspiring individual, is ready for occultism. And we're talking about spiritual occultism. So, but we can touch the lives we can touch. We can do that through the power of the pen and through the power of the word. And, to a certain extent, in person, as well as in a way that is more related to the means of communication that we have now, amazingly, at our disposal. So let us study, let us deeply meditate, and let us find ways to really utilize in service that which we reach through deepening our meditation and deepening and expanding our study. So lots of love, many blessings to everyone. And I'll resume this as soon as may be feasible for me. And thank you for getting this far in the book. Bye-bye for now.